Hello, and welcome to a lecture on labor in the late 19th century in the Gilded Age. And this idea that in unions, labor unions, there is strength, and that is true. The problem for labor is getting into a union. It was very challenging to form effective unions during this time, and we're going to look at a lot of the disadvantages that they had in them. So work inside the factory is very much become depersonalized, and the company director is very much just interested in making money, not so much in the lives of the workers. And the labor market was very large and just flooded. The supply of labor was very high, which means the price of labor is going to be coming down. And for many of them, they're sort of just unskilled labor, which is what most of the industrial bosses wanted. They wanted unskilled labor because it's cheaper and it's easily to replace if it starts to ask for more things for these ones. So workers really had very little bargaining leverage and needing to organize, but as we'll see, the employers had all of the advantages in this. So there are advantages for the employer, and when we talk to an employer, we're talking big corporations. They are the ones who, they've got the money for the press and the lawyers, and they've got a lot more of a voice. They can always bring in strike breakers. If there's a strike, fine, bring in cheaper labor who's willing to work. Often it was Irish or African Americans. You can literally attack the union leaders. Anybody who's trying to help organize them, just send out a goon with a stick and let that union leader know that maybe it's a better idea to not try to organize the workers. Courts were very much on the side of the employers, and the employers could always ask the government for an assist to end strikes using force, bring out the militia, bring out the army. And any labor leaders, they would be blacklisted, meaning they'd be fired, and then they would have a very difficult time trying to get a new job somewhere else because they're on the list. Don't hire this man, he is a labor agitator. And company towns for some of these places as well. And middle class very much had a negative view of unions and workers trying to organize into unions. They see it as something foreign, as something un-American, and or socialist or dangerous or radical, and that workers should, instead of trying to organize to get better pay and everything, should just work harder, and you can have success. And so strikes are not going to succeed unless they get the broad public support. And the very few of the strikes during this time are going to be successful. And then just struggles to unite amongst the workers. White workers, black workers, skilled workers versus unskilled workers, male workers versus female workers, American workers versus immigrant workers, and the moderate workers and radical workers, just wanting a job and just wanting maybe a little bit more pay or safety at the work, against radicals who want to start a revolution, a communist revolution kind of thing. Now, one of the early labor unions that did have some moderate success was known as the Knights of Labor, which started out as a secret organization, but then expanded. And their goal was to get everybody into one big union. And so then you could use a powerful weapon, the general strike, and just shut down the economy altogether. And so all these divisions, they said, no, you're all welcome. It doesn't matter who you are, you can join in ours. And what they wanted was social and economic reforms through laws, not through any kind of revolution. They're not revolutionary, but they will be unfairly associated with a terrorist attack known as the Haymarket Square bombing, and they'll be coming apart. There they are, one of their meetings, African-American and white American woman who had joined up into the Knights of Labor as well. But here's the Haymarket Square incident, and it happened in Chicago. Haymarket Square is in Chicago, and it happened within the context of a strike at McCormick Reaper's factory, where Cyrus McCormick's reapers are produced, and they'd gone on strike. And a mass meeting had been called by anarchists to give speeches, and the police were there keeping an eye on things, and somebody threw a bomb, and it killed some of the police officers. We don't know who threw the bomb. It could have been an agent provocateur, somebody on the side of the employer who wanted to get a lot of bad negative publicity towards the strikers and towards the unions. And killed several police officers. Now, nobody knew who threw the bomb, but 8 anarchists were charged with encouraging such behavior. Now, they clearly hadn't thrown the bomb, but they were found guilty of sort of causing this incident to happen. And 5 of them were sentenced to hanging. 1 committed suicide. But then, calls for their forgiveness were given, and the governor controversially pardoned the remaining 3. But the big effect is for the Knights of Labor, who are unfairly associated with this incident, and the public very much turned against them. There's the 4 being hanged. Now, in terms of strikes during this time, there's 3 big strikes. The railroad strike of 77, the Homestead strike of 92, and the Pullman strike of 1894. All of these are within the context of tough times, of economic downswings. And the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, rail workers, really tough job. It's a very dangerous job, and they closed down the rails. And there's no unions involved in this. It was very spontaneous that the railroad workers, starting in Baltimore, closed down the rails, and then that just sort of spread. And the power of that, you can shut down the entire economy through this. And it collapsed amid extreme violence and destruction of property, and the army had to be called in many cities to end the strike, and it really was more of a war. The strike, as one person said, is not a revolution of fanatics willing to fight for an idea. It is a revolt of working men against low prices of labor, which have been accomplished with corresponding low prices of not being accomplished with corresponding low prices of food, clothing, and house rent. So all of these strikes see that same sort of thing, where the price of things is going up, but the price of your labor, the wage that you're earning, is not. The Homestead strike was at one of Carnegie's steel mills, and the steel workers had taken control of the factory, and following wage cuts in this one. Again, pitched battles, National Guard being brought out to destroy the Union. And the Pullman strike, Pullman Company, the train cars in the company town, in 1893, there's the Depression. They cut wages but maintained high rents in their company town, and that led to, again, a very violent strike that also ended with the army coming out. So we see a commonality to all of them, is that for workers, this is happening in tough times where prices are going up but wages are not, and where the strikes are put down or violently repressed with the assistance of the government, and involved a lot of violence. This is Pittsburgh, a rail station burned down to the ground, and this is in the railroad strike as well. And it's within this context of these violent strikes and these which are being labeled as being anarchists or communists or radical, that we get the moderate and successful union, the American Federation of Labor, coming in, led by Samuel Gompers, and it's a federation of trade unions, skilled workers only. So if you're sort of in a guild, you're an apprentice, or you can join, and it's only skilled workers, and these are the workers that you can't just replace with scabs and strike breakers. If they go on strike, there's nobody to replace them. And Gompers is not interested in any kind of violent strikes or socialist or revolution. He's very sort of not involved in politics at all, and he made that very clear. He just wants to work within the system, not change the system. Unskilled workers, women, blacks were not welcome in his federation, and he did help to create a more positive image for labor. And there is Samuel Gompers there. So we see the success of labor. It's only within the American Federation of Labor. This orange line is showing the total number of workers involved in a union. And we can see this here is the Knights of Labor becoming very successful after a successful strike, the Wabash Railroad strike, and attracting, in a very short period of time, a lot more members into his unit. But then with the Haymarket incident, their membership plummeted down as they become associated with violence and radicalism and extremism. And here's the American Federation of Labor, and especially after 1900, really having success of attracting in only skilled workers who have a skill, a craft that they can work on are being allowed in. So if we just look at all of the early ones, the Knights of Labor is the big one, and the American Federation of Labor. Success, no for the Knights of Labor. For the American Federation of, yes. And the difference, open to all, limited, only skilled workers. That's our really own success. So the advantages of the employer is just too strong. The government is not interested in the plight of the working man. They would just simply say to them, you just put your head down and work harder, and you will find success. The laissez-faire is very much there. Okay, thank you very much for listening.